The scent hit me like a warhammer to the chest. I'd smelled omega pheromones before, sickly sweet things that made my skin crawl, desperate pleas for an alpha's attention that I'd always ignored with disgust. But this was different. This scent wrapped around my throat like silk and steel, flooding my senses with moonlight and night, blooming flowers, so intoxicating that my knees nearly buckled. My vision blurred red at the edges as my body betrayed 40 years of iron control, and I realized with cold horror that I was entering rut, something that hadn't happened in over a decade. The storm raged outside the cave, but the real tempest was the trembling figure pressed against the far wall, silver hair plastered to a face too beautiful to belong to anything human, purple eyes, wide with terror, and something else, something primal stared back at me. The prisoner, the one who'd been traveling with the supply convoy, disguised in peasant clothes, and now, with his scent overwhelming every rational thought in my mind, I understood why. "Stay back," he gasped, but his voice was breaking, his body already arching with need. "General, please." I took a step forward, my hands shaking with the effort of restraint. "You're in heat." I can control it." But even as he spoke, a whimper escaped his lips, and fresh waves of that devastating scent rolled off him in pulses that made my fangs ache. The last coherent thought I had before instinct consumed me entirely was that this would destroy everything. Then I was crossing the cave in 3 strides, pinning that trembling body against the stone wall, and sinking my teeth into the soft flesh where his neck met his shoulder. I woke to the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, and the scent of sex and claiming heavy in the air. The storm had passed. Gray dawn light filtered through the cave entrance, illuminating the disaster I'd created. The Omega lay curled against my chest, unconscious, his pale skin marked with bites and bruises that made bile rise in my throat. But it was the mark on his neck, my mark deep and permanent, that turned my blood to ice. I'd bonded him completely, irreversibly. 40 years of discipline, of denying my alpha nature, of viewing omegas as weaknesses to be exploited in enemies. And I'd lost control with a single prisoner in a single night. The realization was crushing. I was Alaric Stormborn, the Blood General, the man who'd burned 17 cities and felt nothing. I didn't lose control. I didn't have weaknesses. Until now. The Omega stirred, those purple eyes fluttering open, with a confusion that quickly sharpened into awareness, and then horror. He scrambled away from me, hand flying to his neck, where my mark still wept blood. His fingers came away crimson, and the scent of his fear spiked sharp and bitter. "What did you do?" His voice was hoarse, wrecked from screaming. "What did you know?" "No. I forced myself to speak with the same cold authority I used on the battlefield, even as something in my chest twisted at his distress. "You went into heat. I was drawn into rut. We bonded. He repeated the word like a death sentence, which, in many ways, it was. His hand pressed against the mark, and I felt it, a phantom echo of his touch on my own skin, the first whisper of the connection that would bind us for life. "You're lying. Alpha bonds can be broken, not complete bonds." I stood, pulling on my discarded clothes with mechanical precision. "Not marks this deep. You're mine now, forever." The sound that escaped him was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Forever. Gods, you don't even know what you've done, do you?" "I know exactly what I've done." I turned to face him fully, cataloging every detail with a soldier's precision. The moonlight, silver hair, the purple eyes, the aristocratic features that I'd somehow failed to notice beneath the dirt and common clothes. The dawning horror in my gut intensified. "Who are you?" He met my gaze with a defiance that would have been admirable under other circumstances. "Does it matter? You've already claimed me." "It matters." I crossed the space between us in 2 strides, gripping his chin to force him to look at me. His scent spiked again, fear and something else, something that made my alpha instincts roar with possessive satisfaction. I hated it. "Tell me your name." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with the kind of reckless courage that only the truly desperate possess. He smiled, a bitter, broken thing. Leander, Leander Nightshade. The world stopped. Nightshade, the royal family of the Southern Kingdom, the bloodline responsible for 20 years of war, for the deaths of thousands, for the murder of my parents, my sister, my infant nephew, the bloodline I'd sworn to obliterate from existence, and I just bonded with one of them. You're lying, but even as I said it, I was seeing the truth in every elegant line of him, every aristocratic feature. Gods, how had I been so blind? The Southern King's children are in the capital, protected by nothing that matters anymore. His voice was flat, dead. My father sent me to inspect the supply lines. He thought it would be safe, that no one would recognize a prince in peasant clothes. Another broken laugh. He was wrong. I released him like he'd burned me, staggering back as the full weight of the catastrophe crashed over me. I'd bonded with a nightshade, with the son of the man who'd ordered my family's execution, with a prince of the kingdom I devoted my entire life to destroying. The bond pulsed between us, warm and insistent, trying to soothe the rage and horror churning in my chest. I wanted to claw it out, to tear it from my flesh, to undo this impossible mistake, but bonds couldn't be undone. That was the whole point of them. Kill me. Leander's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. He'd pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly, but his chin was lifted in defiant pride. You hate my bloodline. You hate everything I represent. So kill me and be done with it. I can't. The words tasted like poison. If you die, I die. That is how complete bonds work. Understanding dawned in those purple eyes, followed by something worse, resigned acceptance. Then I'm your prisoner, forever. Yes. He laughed again, and this time there was genuine amusement in it, dark and desperate. My father will love this. His least favorite son, bonded to his greatest enemy. It is almost poetic. Your father, I bit off the words, violence surging hot beneath my skin. Your father murdered my family. I know. Leander met my gaze steadily. He murdered mine too, just in different ways. Before I could process that cryptic response, voices echoed from outside the cave. My soldiers, coming to check on their general after the storm. I had seconds to make a decision that would affect the rest of my life, what remained of it. I grabbed Leander's arm, ignoring the way the bond sang at the contact. You'll say nothing about who you are to anyone. You're a captured Omega from the supply convoy. Nothing more, understood. And if I refuse, I leaned in close, letting him see the blood, red of my eyes, the alpha dominance that had terrorized battlefields for decades. Then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. How long do you think you'd survive in a camp full of soldiers who've lost brothers, fathers, sons to your kingdom's blades? He paled, but didn't flinch. You'd let them kill me. You're bonded, Omega. I'd protect you from death. I smiled without humor. Everything else is negotiable. The calculation flickered across his face, weighing his options, finding them all equally terrible. Finally, he nodded. I'll keep your secret, General, for now. Good. I released him, already moving toward the cave entrance. And Leander, don't think about running. I'll feel it the moment you try. I stepped out into the dawn to face my concerned soldiers, leaving my bonded, my enemy, my curse, my unwanted fate, alone in the cave with the ruins of both our futures. The next 3 weeks were a special kind of hell. I'd ordered Leander confined to my tent, ostensibly to keep the valuable prisoner secure. In reality, I couldn't stand having him more than 100 feet away without the bond screaming at me to find him, to protect him, to claim him again. It was infuriating. I'd spent 40 years mastering every weakness, every vulnerability, and now I was reduced to a slave of biology and instinct. Leander, for his part, seemed determined to make my life as miserable as possible within the constraints of his imprisonment. You're planning to attack the Eastern Pass, he observed on the 5th day, looking up from the meal I'd brought him. Because apparently I couldn't even trust my own men not to poison or harass my bonded Omega. The bond insisted on ensuring his safety personally, and I hated every second of it. I paused in the entrance of the tent. How would you know that? Because I can read. He gestured to the maps I'd left spread across my desk, then raised an eyebrow. Did you think I was just decorative? I think you're a liability. I crossed to the desk, gathering the maps with more force than necessary. And if you're smart, you'll keep your observations to yourself. Why? He stood, moving with that fluid grace that seemed inherent to high-born Omegas. The bond purred its approval, and I gritted my teeth against it. Afraid I'll tell my father's forces. I'm your prisoner general. Where exactly would I send this intelligence? He had a point, which only annoyed me more. What do you want, Leander? I want to go home. His voice was quiet, almost wistful. I want to undo the past 3 weeks. I want a lot of things I'll never have. He met my gaze. But since we're both stuck in this nightmare, I want to understand. The Eastern Pass is heavily fortified. You'll lose hundreds of men in a direct assault. So why? Because my king commands it. I cut him off, and unlike your treacherous bloodline, I follow orders. Something flickered across his face, hurt, maybe, or anger. My treacherous bloodline. Yes, of course. We're all the same, aren't we? All equally guilty of my father's sins. Aren't you? I demanded, stepping closer. The bond sparked between us, and I saw his pupils dilate slightly in response. You wear his name, you benefit from his crown, you've lived in luxury while your kingdom starved and bled for his wars. You know nothing about my life. His voice was tight, controlled. Nothing about what I've done or tried to do. But why would you care? I'm just a nightshade, after all. Just another name on your list of people to hate. He was right. I didn't know anything about him beyond his bloodline, and the fact that his scent made me lose every shred of control I'd ever possessed, and I didn't want to know. Knowing would make this complicated, would make him human, instead of just a symbol of everything I'd lost. The Eastern Pass attack is suicide, Leander said quietly, turning back to the maps. But there is another way. The northern ridge has a weakness, a series of caves that your scouts haven't found yet. I used to explore them as a child when my mother would bring me to the summer palace. I stared at him. You're telling me how to invade your own kingdom. I'm telling you how to save lives. He looked up, and there was something in his eyes that I couldn't name. Yours and theirs. The pass will be a slaughter. The caves will get you behind their lines with minimal casualties. What you do with that information is your choice. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why would you help me? Because this war needs to end. His voice was fervent now, desperate. Because every day people die. People on both sides who don't deserve it, who never asked for this. Because maybe, if you win quickly enough, fewer families will be destroyed. He paused. Like yours was, like mine. I didn't believe him, couldn't let myself believe him. But that night, I sent scouts to the northern ridge, and they found exactly what he'd described, a network of caves that would allow my forces to bypass the Eastern Pass entirely. The attack succeeded. We lost 37 men instead of the projected 400. When I returned to camp 3 days later, covered in blood and ash and victory, I found Leander exactly where I'd left him, sitting by the tent's small brazier, reading one of my books on military strategy. He looked up as I entered, his gaze taking in my appearance with a physician's assessment. You're hurt. I'm fine. The wound on my side was superficial, already healing with alpha resilience. Let me see. He was already moving toward me, and I was too tired to argue. His fingers were gentle as they unlaced my armor, peeling back the blood-soaked leather to reveal the gash beneath. This needs cleaning. I said, I'm fine. And I say, you're an idiot. There was no heat in his words, just a kind of weary exasperation. Sit down before you fall down. I sat more, because the bond was singing at having him close, than because I actually needed medical attention. His touch was careful, professional, as he cleaned and bandaged the wound. The scent of him, moonlight and night flowers, wrapped around me, soothing something I hadn't realized was ragged. The caves worked, I said finally, breaking the silence. I know. A small smile. I felt it through the bond, your satisfaction, your relief at not losing more men. I'd forgotten about that aspect of the bond, the emotional bleed that grew stronger over time. The thought of him feeling my emotions, knowing my thoughts, was invasive in a way that made my skin crawl. How many people died in the attack? 37 of yours, maybe 100 of theirs, mostly soldiers. He secured the bandage with practiced efficiency. Still too many, but better than it would have been. You're remarkably calm about me killing your countrymen. They stopped being my countrymen the day you marked me. His voice was matter, of fact. The bond doesn't care about kingdoms or politics. To every Omega instinct I have, you're my alpha, my pack. My loyalty belongs to you now, whether I want it to or not. The words should have been triumphant. Instead, they felt like a condemnation. You hate it, the bond. I hate that I didn't choose it, that we didn't choose it. He sat back, those purple eyes unreadable. But hating it doesn't make it less real. We're tied together, Alaric, for better or worse. It was the first time he'd used my name, and the sound of it in his voice did something strange to my chest. I stood abruptly, needing distance. Get some rest. We move camp at dawn. Alaric. He caught my wrist, and the contact sent sparks of sensation up my arm. Thank you for listening, for using the caves. I pulled away. I didn't do it for you. I did it for my men. I know. He smiled, sad and knowing. But you still did it, that matters. I left before I could do something foolish, like ask what he meant by that. Like wonder if maybe, possibly, this cursed bond had given me something other than a weakness. The assassination attempt came 6 weeks after the bonding. I'd grown complacent, a fatal mistake for any soldier. Leander's information had proven accurate time and again. He'd guided us through supply routes, warned us of ambushes, even decoded intercepted messages from his father's court. I'd started to not trust him exactly, but rely on him, depend on him. Another weakness. I should have known his cooperation was a ploy, should have remembered that he was a nightshade, that treachery ran in his blood like poison, should have been prepared when the messenger arrived with the official pardon from the Southern King, full amnesty and safe passage home in exchange for one simple task: kill General Stormborn. I found the letter tucked inside Leander's pillow, discovered by one of my soldiers during a routine search I'd been too soft to cancel. The poison was in a vial hidden in his clothing, odorless, tasteless, deadly to alphas within hours of ingestion. My men wanted to execute him immediately. I ordered them out and faced my bonded Omega alone. Leander stood in the center of my tent, perfectly composed, despite the guards who'd dragged him from his bed and thrown him at my feet. His purple eyes met mine without flinching, without pleading, just waiting. Explain. My voice was ice and razors. There is nothing to explain. He gestured to the letter in my hand. You read it. My father offers me freedom in exchange for your death, a simple transaction. Were you going to do it? I stalked toward him, watching for any sign of deception. Poison me and run home to your king. Does it matter? He tilted his head. You've already decided I'm guilty, that I'm just another treacherous nightshade, incapable of anything but betrayal. Answer the question. No, the word was flat, final. I wasn't going to do it. Liar. I grabbed his throat, not squeezing but holding him in place. The bond screamed at me to let go, to protect, to soothe. I ignored it. I should kill you for this, then do it. His pulse hammered beneath my palm, but his gaze never wavered. Kill me and die yourself. At least then this nightmare would be over for both of us. You'd like that, wouldn't you? One final act of service to your king, taking me down with you. My king. He laughed bitterly. You still don't understand, do you? My father doesn't want me back, Alaric. He never has. I'm his greatest disappointment, an Omega son when he wanted an alpha heir, a peace seeker in a family of warmongers, a coward who wouldn't even bed, an alpha of his choosing to secure an alliance. I loosened my grip slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying the letter is real, but it is not a pardon. Leander's voice was tired, so tired. It is an execution order. If I poison you, I die too. We're bonded. My father knows this. He is counting on it. 2 problems solved with 1 letter. The implications hit me like a cavalry charge. He wants you dead. He wants us both dead. Leander closed his eyes. You're his greatest threat, and I'm his greatest shame. This way he gets rid of both and can claim, I died heroically trying to kill his enemy. It is actually quite brilliant. I released him, stepping back as my mind raced through the possibilities. Every scenario led to the same conclusion. Lander was telling the truth. No one would send a bonded omega poison that would kill their alpha unless they wanted the omega dead too. And every piece of intelligence Leander had provided over the past weeks had been accurate, useful, had saved lives on both sides. He hadn't been helping me to betray me. He'd been helping me because he genuinely wanted the war to end. Why didn't you tell me about the letter? I demanded. Because I burned it the day it arrived 4 days ago. He met my gaze. I was never going to use the poison, Alaric. I threw it in the latrine pit the same night. Someone must have planted a replacement to frame me. Who? I don't know. One of your men who wants the valuable prisoner dead. One of my father's spies in your camp who wants to ensure I don't give you any more useful information. Take your pick. His smile was bitter. I have enemies everywhere. At least you're honest about hating me. I crossed to my desk, thinking hard. If someone had planted the evidence, they'd done it recently. My soldiers had searched Leander's belongings just 5 days prior and found nothing, which meant the spy was still in camp waiting to see if their ploy worked. You believe me? Leander's voice was surprised. I believe the evidence. I turned to face him, and the evidence says someone wants us both dead. The question is whether they're working for your father or someone else entirely. Does it matter? It does if we're going to survive this. I made a decision that would probably damn me. From now on, you stay in my sight at all times. No more separate sleeping arrangements, no more privacy, and you tell me everything, every contact, every suspicion. You want me to spy for you. I want you to stay alive. The admission cost me, but it was true. Somewhere between the cave and now, between hating him and needing him, I'd stopped wanting him dead. The bond had won whether I liked it or not. Because if you die, I die, and I'm not done destroying your father yet. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe gratitude. Alaric, don't. I cut him off. This doesn't change anything between us. You're still my prisoner, still a nightshade, still the son of the man who murdered my family, but you're also my bonded omega, and that means I protect you even from yourself, even from my own father, especially from him. That night, Leander slept in my bed for the first time since the cave, not touching, not speaking, just existing in the same space, while I kept watch for assassins and traitors. The bond purred its contentment at having him close, and I tried not to think about how right it felt, having him there, how much I'd come to depend on his presence, his insight, his strange, gentle strength that somehow survived despite everything he'd endured. How terrifying it was to realize that I didn't just need him to survive. I wanted him to stay. The spy revealed himself 2 weeks later by trying to poison my entire command staff during a strategy meeting. Leander smelled it first, his omega senses more acute than any alpha's, and knocked the wine pitcher from my hand before anyone could drink. The poison was the same type from the letter. The spy was one of my own lieutenants, paid by the Southern King to eliminate his most effective general. Under interrogation, he revealed a network of agents spread throughout my army, all working toward the same goal. I executed them all. 23 men I'd trusted, fought beside, bled with. 23 traitors who'd sold their loyalty for Southern gold. It should have been a victory, rooting out corruption, strengthening my forces. Instead, it felt like defeat, like everything I'd built was rotting from the inside. You couldn't have known. Leander spoke quietly from where he sat in my tent, watching me clean blood from my sword for the 3rd time that day. The executions had been messy. I should have known. I slammed the sword down harder than necessary. I trained them, led them, and they betrayed everything we fought for. They betrayed you for the same reason I was supposed to, because my father made them an offer they couldn't refuse. He moved closer, and I was too tired to push him away. Money, land, titles, promises of peace. He is very good at finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. What did he offer you? Leander was quiet for a long moment. Freedom. A chance to leave the court, to study medicine in the eastern provinces, where no one would know my name. He knew I hated the war, hated being used as a political tool. He thought it would be enough. But it wasn't. No. He sat beside me close enough that our shoulders brushed. The bonds sang at the contact, because I realized something in that cave when you marked me. My father had sent me on that supply inspection, hoping exactly this would happen. He knew the routes weren't safe, knew your army was close. He wanted me captured, wanted me compromised. Why? Because an unmarked Omega Prince has value, can be married off for alliances, used for political leverage. But a bonded Omega, especially one bonded to his greatest enemy. Leander's laugh was hollow, worthless. Ruined, better off dead. I turned to look at him fully. You think he sent you out there to get you killed? I think he sent me out there hoping you'd rape me and kill me. Yes, the bonding was just a bonus, a way to take you down too when he eventually poisoned us both. He met my gaze. My father has never cared for me, Alaric. I accepted that long ago, but I didn't realize he actively wanted me dead until I saw that letter, until I understood that he'd sacrifice his own son just to wound you. The pain in his voice was raw, real, and despite everything, despite my hatred for his bloodline, my rage at his father, my determination to remain detached, I felt something crack in my chest. He doesn't deserve you. The words escaped before I could stop them. Leander's eyes widened. What? Your father, I stood, needing to move, to think. He doesn't deserve a son who tries to stop a war, who risks everything to save lives on both sides, who could have let me walk into a dozen traps but didn't. I faced him. Whatever else you are, you're not him. You're not your bloodline. You don't mean that. But there was hope in his voice, desperate and fragile. I do, and God's help me. I realized it was true. Leander wasn't like his father, wasn't cruel or power, hungry or willing to sacrifice innocence for political gain. He was soft where the southern king was hard, kind where his father was ruthless, genuinely seeking peace instead of domination. He was everything I'd never expected to find in a nightshade, everything I'd never expected to want. Alaric. Leander stood, crossing to me with that fluid grace that always made the bond purr. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't hate you. The admission felt like surrender. I should. You're everything I swore to destroy, but I don't. What do you feel then? He was close now, close enough that I could smell him. Moonlight and night flowers, and something uniquely Leander that made my alpha instincts roar to life. I don't know. I reached out, tucking a strand of silver hair behind his ear. His breath hitched at the touch. Confusion, anger, want. Too many things at once. Want? His voice was barely a whisper. The bond. Fuck the bond. His eyes flashed. The bond makes me need you, makes my body crave yours, makes me feel safe when you're near. But want. Want is choice, Alaric. Want is something the bond can't force. He stepped closer until we were breathing the same air. Do you want me? Not because you have to, but because you choose to. The question hung between us, dangerous and electric. I could lie, could blame everything on the bond, could maintain the fiction that this was all just biology, but I'd built my reputation on brutal honesty, on never flinching from difficult truths. Yes, the word came out rough, reluctant. Yes, I want you. Have wanted you since that night in the cave, even when I hated myself for it, even when I tried to convince myself it was just the bond. Leander's smile was sunrise after an endless night. Good. Then he was kissing me, and it was nothing like that first frenzied claiming in the cave. This was deliberate, intentional, a choice made with clear minds and open eyes. His lips were soft against mine, tasting of the tea he'd been drinking, and something sweeter. The bond flared between us, but underneath it was something else, something real and terrifying and entirely too fragile. I pulled him closer, one hand fisting in his silver hair while the other spanned his waist. He melted into me with a sound that was half sigh, half moan, and I realized with startling clarity that this was what I'd been fighting since the moment I marked him. Not the bond, not the physical need, but this, the genuine connection, the meeting of minds and hearts and souls that went deeper than any biological imperative. The realization that against all reason, all logic, all sense, I was falling for him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leander rested his forehead against mine. What do we do now? I don't know. I was a general, a strategist, someone who always had a plan. But this was uncharted territory. Your father still wants us both dead. My king still demands victory over the South. We're enemies by birth and circumstance, but not by choice. No, I cupped his face, memorizing every detail. Not by choice. Then we make a new choice. His voice was steady, certain. We end this war, not through conquest or surrender, but through something better, something that might actually last. Peace, peace, he nodded. My father won't allow it. Your king won't either. But maybe they don't have to. Maybe there is another way. I thought about the spy network my executions had revealed, about the corruption in both kingdoms, about how many people on both sides were profiting from this endless war, about how many wanted it to continue. Consequences be damned. You're talking about revolution. I'm talking about change. Leander's eyes blazed with an intensity I'd never seen before. Real change. A new order where kings can't send their children to die for profit, where soldiers don't have to choose between loyalty and conscience, where two people from enemy kingdoms can bond and not have to hide it like a shameful secret. It was idealistic, naive, everything a hardened soldier like me should dismiss as fantasy. But looking at Leander, at his passion, his conviction, his absolute refusal to accept that the world had to be cruel, I found myself believing. It won't be easy, I warned. Your father has ruled for 30 years. He won't give up power willingly, I know. Leander's smile was sharp, dangerous. That is why we'll take it from him. Planning a coup while maintaining the fiction of war was delicate work. We had to be careful. One wrong move, and we'd both end up dead, bond or no bond. But Leander proved to be as skilled at political maneuvering as he was at battlefield strategy. Over the next 3 months, he made contact with dissidents in the southern court through carefully coded letters. Nobles who were tired of the war, who'd lost too much to my armies, who saw the writing on the wall and knew the South couldn't win through military might alone. He promised them peace, prosperity, and a ruler who would actually care about the kingdom instead of using it as a personal piggy bank. In exchange, they promised support when the time came. Meanwhile, I worked on my own king, a brutal, efficient man who cared only about victory and tribute. I fed him victories, yes, but increasingly I showed him the cost. The depleted treasury, the exhausted soldiers, the provinces on the brink of revolt from the war taxes. I made him see that endless war was a losing strategy, that the South would fall eventually, but might take the North down with it in the process. He didn't like it, but he listened. More importantly, he started to trust my judgment enough to consider alternatives. You're suggesting an alliance, he said during one late night strategy session, his eyes sharp and calculating, with the South, through marriage, through bonding actually. I kept my voice neutral. It is already done. I marked the Southern Prince during a combat encounter. The bond is complete and irreversible. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my king started to laugh, a harsh, barking sound that held no humor. You bonded with a nightshade, with the spawn of our greatest enemy. Yes. And you think I should accept this, legitimize it? I think you should use it. I met his gaze steadily. Prince Leander has support in the southern court, nobles who would back him for the throne if his father were to suddenly step down. With my army and his political connections, we could end this war in months instead of years, install a friendly regime in the south, create a lasting peace through our bond. Or you could be a fool being manipulated by a pretty Omega. I considered that. I had extensively. But the intelligence he has provided has been consistently accurate. The contacts he has mentioned have proven real. And frankly, Your Majesty, we're hemorrhaging resources we can't afford to lose. This war will bankrupt us within 2 years if it continues. My king drummed his fingers on the table, thinking, what does the prince want in return? An end to the war, protection for his people, the right to rule the South as he sees fit, with our support but not our interference. And if I refuse, then I'll continue to fight your war until there is nothing left to fight for. I stood, preparing to be dismissed or arrested, or both. But I thought you should know there is another option, a better option. He studied me for a long moment. You care for him, this bonded Omega. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, foolish. But there was something almost approving in his tone. Love makes alphas weak, or it makes us fight harder. I thought of Leander, waiting in my tent, trusting me to handle this. For something worth preserving instead of just destroying. Philosophical nonsense. My king waved a dismissive hand, but practical nonsense, I'll grant you. Set up a meeting with these southern nobles. Let's see if this mad plan of yours has any merit. It was the closest thing to approval I was going to get. The meeting happened on neutral ground, a small inn on the border, where merchants from both kingdoms traded in uneasy peace. Leander attended in disguise, his silver hair dyed dark, and his aristocratic bearing hidden beneath common clothes. 5 southern nobles came, representing the most powerful families in the kingdom, after the royal house itself. They were cautious, suspicious, clearly expecting a trap, until Leander removed his hood and they saw his face. Your Highness, the eldest noble, a duchess named Marin, nearly fell to her knees. We thought you were dead. Your father announced you'd been killed by northern forces months ago. My father announces many things. Leander's voice was dry, most of them convenient fictions. I am very much alive, as you can see. Bonded to General Stormborn, yes, but alive and quite willing to discuss the future of our kingdom. Bonded. Another noble, younger and angrier, spat the word like a curse. You betrayed your kingdom for an alpha's knot. I moved forward, ready to defend Leander's honor, but he held up a hand to stop me. I did nothing of the sort. The bonding was accidental, a consequence of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what I've learned since then has made me realize something important. This war serves no one but my father and his cronies. It bleeds both kingdoms dry, while lining the pockets of weapons dealers and war profiteers. It needs to end. So you'd sell us to the north. The young noble was on his feet now. Make us vassals to their king. I'd make us partners. Leander's gaze swept the room. The north is as tired of this war as we are. They want peace, stability, trade, things that benefit both kingdoms. What they don't want is to occupy hostile territory and fight an endless insurgency. General Stormborn has assured me of this. And you believe him? Duchess Marin's voice was gentle but skeptical. A nightshade trusting a northern general? I believe him because I've spent 3 months watching him make decisions that prioritize his soldiers' lives over strategic victories. Because he could have invaded the capital twice now, but pulled back to avoid civilian casualties. Because he negotiated a surrender for the eastern provinces that allowed them to keep their autonomy and local governance. Leander's voice was passionate, convinced. He is not the blood general the propaganda makes him out to be. He is a man who wants this war to end as much as we do. The nobles exchanged glances, uncertain. Finally, Duchess Marin spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Your Highness? A bloodless coup. Leander pulled out maps and documents he'd been preparing for weeks. My father's support comes primarily from 3 sources: the military, the merchant guilds, and the northern provinces. General Stormborn controls the military through his victories. Most of our generals know they can't beat him, and would welcome an honorable surrender. The merchant guilds are losing money on this war and would support anyone who promised peace and open trade. That leaves the northern provinces, which your mother's family controls, Duchess Marin murmured, understanding dawning. Exactly. My aunt has already promised her support if I can guarantee protection from northern retaliation, which I can, through my bond with General Stormborn. He looked around the room. We have all the pieces, we just need the courage to use them. This is treason, the young noble said, but there was less heat in his voice now. This is survival. Leander's response was sharp. My father will bleed this kingdom white rather than admit defeat. He'll sacrifice every last one of us for his pride. Is that what you want? More sons dead on battlefields, more daughters sold into marriages with northern nobles as spoils of war, more villages burned and crops destroyed? No, Duchess Marin stood. No, we want peace. We've wanted it for years, but we thought it was impossible. It wasn't impossible. Leander smiled. Just improbable, but now we have a chance, a real chance. Will you take it? One by one, the nobles pledged their support, even the young angry one, who admitted that he'd lost 2 brothers to the war and couldn't stomach losing a third. By the time the meeting ended, we had a coalition, a plan, a timeline, 3 weeks. That is all we needed. 3 weeks to position our forces, secure our allies, and strike. The coup itself was almost anticlimactic. Leander's intelligence was perfect. He knew exactly where his father would be, which guards were loyal, which could be bought or intimidated into standing down. My soldiers, battle-hardened and efficient, moved through the capital with surgical precision. There was resistance, yes, but limited. Most people were too shocked or too relieved to fight back. The Southern King himself was captured in his bedchamber, surrounded by wealth and luxury, while his kingdom starved. He raged, threatened, promised terrible retribution. But stripped of his power, he was just a bitter old man ranting at forces he could no longer control. You, he snarled when he saw Leander, his eyes wild with hatred. This is your doing. My own son, betraying his blood. You betrayed me first. Leander's voice was calm, cold. When you sent me into danger, hoping I'd die. When you tried to have me poisoned along with my bonded alpha. When you chose your pride over your kingdom's survival. He stepped closer. You taught me well, Father. You taught me that family loyalty means nothing when power is at stake. I'm just following your example. I'll see you dead for this, both of you. You'll see nothing but a prison cell. I moved to stand beside Leander, my hand resting on his shoulder, in clear claim and support. You're done, old man. The war is over. Your reign is over. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left. He spat at our feet, still raging as the guards dragged him away to the dungeons. Leander watched him go with an expression I couldn't read. Grief, maybe, or relief, or some complicated mixture of both. Are you all right? I asked quietly. I don't know. He turned to me, those purple eyes bright with unshed tears. He is my father. I should feel something, regret, guilt, sorrow, but all I feel is empty. That is the bond he broke. I pulled him into my arms, not caring who saw. The one that should have existed between father and son. He destroyed it long before you destroyed him. I know. Leander buried his face in my chest, breathing deep. It still hurts. It should. I stroked his hair, offering what comfort I could. It means you're better than he was, that you still have the capacity to feel loss, even for someone who didn't deserve your love. We stood like that for a long moment. Alpha and Omega, General and Prince, 2 people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances, and somehow made it work. Around us, the capital celebrated, not because they supported the coup necessarily, but because the war was finally definitively over. The transition of power took months to stabilize. Leander was crowned King of the South, in a ceremony that emphasized unity and healing rather than triumph. I stood beside him, not as conqueror, but as consort, the bonded alpha who'd helped end a war instead of perpetuating it. The Northern King accepted a peace treaty that made both kingdoms independent, but allied trade partners, instead of enemies. With our bond, as the living symbol of that alliance. It wasn't perfect. There were those on both sides who resented the changes, who wanted vengeance or dominance or a return to the old ways. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. Leander proved to be a brilliant administrator, using the same strategic mind that had helped me plan battles to instead reconstruct his kingdom. He reformed the tax system, invested in infrastructure, opened diplomatic relations with kingdoms that had stayed neutral during the war. He was beloved by his people, the Omega King who'd ended the war, who'd sacrificed his own freedom and safety to bring peace. They didn't know the full story, of course. Didn't know about the cave, the accidental bonding, the weeks of hatred and confusion and slow-burning want. They saw only the result, two former enemies bound together, choosing cooperation over conflict. As for me, I retired from active military service. There were no more wars to fight, no more battles to win. Instead, I became what I'd never imagined, a partner, a consort, someone who supported rather than conquered. It was strange, uncomfortable, occasionally frustrating, but also good, right? Do you regret it? Leander asked me one night, months after his coronation. We were in our private chambers, away from the court and the politics and the endless demands of ruling. Just the two of us, bonded and bound, and choosing each other every single day. Regret what? All of it. The bonding, the coup, giving up your military career. He turned to face me, those purple eyes searching. You were the blood general, feared across two kingdoms. Now you're, what? A king's husband, a retired soldier. Now I'm yours. I pulled him close, breathing in his scent, moonlight and night flowers and home. And I don't regret a single moment of it, even the parts that hurt, even the parts I hated. I kissed him softly, especially those parts because they brought me here, to you. Even the cave, even the cave. I smiled against his lips. Especially the cave, actually. It gave me you. You really are getting soft in your old age, Alaric. Only for you. I nipped at his jaw, making him gasp. Everyone else still gets the blood general. Good, he pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Because I like you both ways, hard and soft, dangerous and gentle, my alpha. Your alpha, I agreed, for as long as you'll have me, forever then. His smile was radiant, certain, because the bond says so, and because I choose it. Every day, Alaric, I choose you. I kissed him then, deep and thorough, letting my actions speak what words couldn't quite capture. The bond sang between us, yes, but underneath it was something stronger. The choice we made every morning to wake up together, to build together, to be together despite everything that should have kept us apart. We'd started as enemies, become reluctant allies, transformed into something neither of us expected, and now we were simply us, bonded, yes, but also bound by something deeper than biology or duty or fate, bound by choice, by love, by the determination to build something better than the world we'd inherited. The war was over, our war. But the real battle, the one to maintain peace, to heal wounds, to prove that enemies could become more, that battle continued every day. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd found the only person I wanted to fight it with. My Omega, my King, my Leander, forever.